Good evening. What day are we again here? I think we're all feeling the same pain here. Thank you all for being patient while we got the technology to cooperate. It's so terrific to see so many people here. This is great. I was worried the weather was definitely going to keep everybody home and having hot cocoa or something. Betsy will happily help you out with the coffee machine if you need some hot cocoa, by the way, so we can still fulfill all your wishes and dreams. Welcome back, all. This is our inaugural 2020. It's another decade, and indeed, that's part and parcel of what I want to talk about. It's another decade, another generation of students that are different from the one we just had just a few months ago, it seems. I'm Tom Garza. I'm the director of the Texas Language Center, and I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Slavic and Eurasian Studies. I'm so glad to welcome you here, and since it took us a while to get started, I'm going to forgo all the chatter and get right to the point. You may have noticed that there is a difference in the way the students you have in the last year, maybe 2 years, and you and your materials interact one with the other. It could be something very subtle. It could simply be they ask the question, why? Almost like an irritating 2-year-old. It could be that they question the relevance of what you're teaching them with what it is that they are interested in, even in an elective course that you chose to take Russian. Why are you asking me why I'm choosing Pushkin and not Dostoevsky for you? Deal with it. We're looking at, I think, ladies and gentlemen, part and parcel of what we're all seeing, and our colleagues in K through 12 have been telling us, warning us for about the last decade now, that this group was coming into our classrooms, Generation Z, the visual generation, global, social, mobile generation that we're looking at. Who are these individuals? If you are, I think maybe I'm peering around the room, one of the only remaining baby boomers here in this group. Hey, boomer. Yeah. We're the ones who keep getting derided as not understanding what everybody else does. Gen Xers, a number of you, I think, have fallen now into that category who came into graduate school probably sometime in that, nodding sweetly. And so many of my students, grad students and otherwise, fall into the millennial category. But this is our new target. The group born between 1995 and 2017, a group now called Gen Z, or Gen Next. I'm not sure what we do after this generation because we've run out of letters here. I think Generation A prime is my guess. But who are they? All that does is describe them chronologically, some of their characteristics. I love this particular graphic that I stole off a Gen Z site that makes a couple of distinctions that are very relevant to what we do. One of the most palpable differences that I've seen so far, both in talking with grad students who are still very millennial and some of my new undergraduates are very now Gen Z, is the difference of having been born during an economic boom time and more or less feeling a sense of, the word that gets overused probably, entitlement. Why don't I have? Why am I paying for my textbooks? Shouldn't you just be giving them to me? Shouldn't everything be online for me? And Gen Z, who was born almost certainly during, and remembers, the Great Recession. And indeed, having to go without. These three, in fact, kind of go together. Recession, being pragmatic. Do I buy this application to put on my cell phone, or do I go without this one so that I can get 2 of these? And saving money. Actually thinking about the economy of education. And indeed, again, I say all this is incredibly relevant because the expectation then for anyone born in a period of need, want, is why am I doing what you're asking me to do? Is it actually relevant to the ends? The second tier, so after that cluster at the top, mobile natives as opposed to a mobile pioneer. Millennials taught a lot of us the great power that could be in one of our now numerous handheld devices. But Gen Z was born with a device in their hand. That's a big difference. The fact that Gen Z doesn't know how life could exist before the mobile phone, or before a tablet, or before electronic interface, virtual interface. And again, brands, I love this, brands that feel authentic, the sense that it's relevant, that it's necessary. And then we get later to preferring Snapchat and Instagram, that's less, well, but a little relevant to us. But I think some of these differences you'll see in what I've now done in this polling. So where I came to really want to talk about this topic, and I have now, indeed next week we're going out to Columbia and Yale to give a version of this talk to them as well. I've kind of been taking this talk on the road because we're all, I think, feeling the pain here. For me, it came down 2 years ago in teaching an ongoing UGS large seminar that I've had since about 2000 on Russian sci-fi. 250 students, all different colleges, all disciplines, all desires, different learning types, pretty much 50-50 male-female, although a real spectrum gender being revealed and very much non-binary gender revealed in that class group. And suddenly, for the first time in teaching, after teaching this course for over pretty much 18 years, I'm going over the syllabus with the group last fall, and we're going to do this, and by the time we get to March, we'll be reading these texts and so, and then... Question. So why are we spending a whole week on the films of Tarkovsky? And I kind of paused and said, well, because they're some of the most well-known of the Russian Soviet era science fiction films. Everyone knows them. Yeah, no, I get that. I know that. But why are we doing that? Well, because you should know these films. No, I understand. I kind of know who he is, but why are we using these films? What does it have to do with this course? And I suddenly realized I'm defending my syllabus to an 18-year-old. And yeah, I did find that a little offensive, but then I realized, no, why not? And his question actually was a bit mislabeled, misleading. He wasn't asking so much, why is it in the course? But given that I'm in this course, why do I need to know this? It was actually a question about relevance all the way through. The Chronicle of Higher Education last year released a very thin little brochure, booklet study that were the results of a 3-year longitudinal, well, not that long, but a 3-year longitudinal study on Gen Z, some in K-12, but the majority of them in colleges, asking them a series of questions about what they were learning, why they were learning it, what did it have to do with who they wanted to be, and so forth, to try to get some of these A or B, is it this or that preference of the group. It's an interesting study. If you are curious about it, you can buy this on the Chronicle's website for some outrageous amount of money. It's only about 24 pages long, and they want something like $110 for it. Or there are lots and lots of pirate PDFs of it available. Send me an email. I can't say this out. Oh, stop recording, for God's sake. I will happily provide, for educational purposes only, of course, a closed copy of a PDF if you're interested in the entire study. But I want to go through a few of the salient features that I think have everything to do with what we do in our classrooms for Lang and Lit. So some takeaways from that longer study that talks a lot about global pioneering, what careers are going to be probably the best suited, that Gen Z is best suited for, and all, which again may be very much relevant to what we want to do as well, but really look at the takeaways for our world language and culture courses. So one of the sections asked Gen Zers to provide the descriptors of their ideal instructor, general purpose, so not Lang and Lit or Lang and culture, but just who do you want to be teaching you? The kind of who are they, what do they do in class that makes them appealing to you? And so what's interesting here at the bottom of their list, and this is, as I call it, seemingly bad news. When I read this for the first time, I really did the emoji. At the very, very bottom of their list of who inspires me were teachers who teach me about global issues. That's kind of what we do in world language classes, is we talk about why Danish actually has relevance to everything in the EU and hence everything in the world, right? And what Putin is doing is actually the second White House, basically, right? So we do that. And the bottom was, I prefer a professor who has a global view of the world. Very, very last descriptor. Less than 1% response. Yikes. But wait, I always do first the bad news, now the good news. For the good news, and here's where, and hold on to those as bottom because I want to spin those two categories. At the top of their list, though, it's as though they got a list that said, who teaches world languages and cultures? Describe your average Russian, Danish, German, Italian, French, Chinese, Arabic teacher. Someone who makes class interesting and involving, and that word involving involves me, makes it relevant to me. That's what we do. We somehow have this in our DNA. We take on the job of doing language and culture because we want to make the class interesting to them. We want them to feel what we feel about our languages and cultures. They're enthusiastic about teaching. That's us. That's us. We're the ones who come in every day, 5 days a week, in our 601 classes for 6 hours a week and assigning 12.5 hours of homework and all and grading all that homework because we care. We're enthusiastic about this. Communicates clearly everything our job. Most of us in the teaching profession strive to do what we have to do. Is that even a relevant image anymore in 2020? Does everyone get that reference? Probably not. That was very Gen Z, by the way. Yeah, it's not relevant to me. I don't know who that is. Right? A little bit of goodwill hunting. That's probably not so much. So the top of the list, not a problem. The bottom of the list, we still have to talk a bit about. But hang on. I've got some more good news. But wait for it. So the other section, there were two big sections of it. We're specifically asking, how do you learn? Asking Gen Zers, how do I learn? Here the takeaways are a bit even more interesting, I should say. So it was all good news. The bottom of the list and the top of the list. So at the top of their list, they like to learn in person with group activities that involve their classmates. That's what we do. We do that. Yay. Yay for us and what we do. They like in-person lectures. I haven't heard that in nearly 20 years. Lecture to me. Tell me about verbs of motion. Right? They like YouTube. So do we. We use YouTube all the time, giving clips of realia, having students create their own YouTube clips to post as part of group projects. They like print books again. I really didn't believe that result, but it's in their top choices. They want to see things as takeaways with them. And indeed, if we put our things online, and I've noticed this again in both my language classes and in my content courses, they print them out and put them in binders and write all over them. It's like back when we were undergrads. What the hell, right? So all of that's great. That's at the top of the list. Now watch this. Even the bad news is good for us. So what do they not like? Wholly, entirely online instruction. Right? We've been yelling from the rooftops, please don't replace us with an online course. The face-to-face interaction is actually important. Gen Z agrees and says, no, we're perfectly happy to get material content provided online, no problem with that, but I want instruction. I want to talk about the material that I've read online or looked at online. If there's like a YouTube video that shows me how to use the passé composé, that's great, but then I want to go talk to my instructor, and I want my instructor to use it with me in class. So online here meaning not hybrid, but entire course, online instruction, no interface with a human. Podcast, this is a real shift from millennials, who more or less innovated the podcast. Gen Zers, not so much. They don't simply want to hear just kind of someone's opinion. They want the interaction. And ebooks, they, again, will print them out. They don't mind getting them as ebooks, but they're going to wind up printing them out there. That's at the very bottom. So all the news there for what we've been doing in our classes is good. So, what's our takeaway? I'm happy about this part. Everything we thought we should have been doing back then, late 80s, early 90s, is actually 100% relevant for Gen Z. The old idea that what the proficiency movement of the late 80s, early 90s told us about language acquisition not proceeding as a line, but rather as a never-ending filling up of a vessel that gets more and more capacious as we get further along in our instruction, still holds true. The fact that proficiency instruction tells us we're giving instruction not to teach about the language, but rather to teach how to use the language. I'm seeing a lot of nods. That always warms my heart when everyone goes, of course that's right. I was joking about giving a lecture on verbal aspect. Okay, we don't do that, right? That's the kind of thing we do use a YouTube video for, but then in class it's using the language. And the world readiness standards that we've come to only in the last decade that really give, for the first time, things we've been kind of saying, either saying or tacitly doing the last decade. Getting students to say, what can you do in the language? And by being able even to self-assess, the students are able to say, I know I can make an acquaintance. Okay, I could go through a good task. I can approach someone I know somewhat well, get to know the person better, ask the person to join me for lunch, go into a restaurant, get a table, order lunch. We're going up the scale, we're moving up into intermediate low here. And then, great, but my meal comes, it's not what I ordered. I now need to get the wait person, the server, to take this back because it's not what I ordered, and I can't eat fish because I'm allergic to iodine. That's a test. It's here, and my Russian is here. So that kind of self-awareness is exactly what both proficiency and the standards have now brought to our profession to help us better understand what is it that we want our students to be doing, and for students to be able to say, here's where I am on this list. I'm now here, I'm trying to get to here. What do I need to be able to do? Everything about Gen Z talks, and you're going to hear this word over and over again in the last remaining minutes here, relevance, relevance, relevance. The standards proficiency is all about making language teaching and learning relevant. Yay for us. We got that one right. So, what are the boxes that we tick to remind us all why we do, why and how we do what we do, and why that works for Gen Z? We have been, if we're doing proficiency-based instruction, we focus on real-life communication. We're not talking about textbook speech. The Russian I learned, I've truly never heard in my life outside of that textbook in 1976. This is Anton. Anton is a student. Anton is a good student. Anton is a good student at Moscow University. Anton is a good student at Moscow University in the middle of Moscow. No one talks like that. And yet, somehow I managed to learn Russian, probably because I just am so stubborn. But we focus on real-life communication from level 0, from first days, get them to say and do things and hear things. We use authentic materials to make that real-life communication both meaningful, but also make it entertaining, because it's things that people really do say in German and French, Italian and Arabic, and so forth. Lots of student-centered activities. No longer are we getting students who only want to learn the language to read the great literature. We're getting students who are engineers, who are in medicine, who are in biology and other sciences. They're in liberal arts, but all over liberal arts and social sciences. So helping our students know, again, relevance, relevance. I'm here as an historian learning Russian because I want to read historical documents about the revolution, something like that. Making, in a sense, activities that will focus on what that student's interested in. FaceTime, part and parcel of our intensive method, moving to the 6-6 or 6-6-6 model, was trying to increase the face-to-face contact we have as the human being in the class with our students. Again, making sure what the Gen Z were saying, that I want FaceTime. If I'm going to be in class, there better be a human being in there that's instructing me, right? Significantly increase cultural exposure more and more, and that has a lot to do with authentic materials, culturally loaded embedded materials. All of this that we try to do, all of these features we try to bring into our classes, lowering the affective filters. One of the things I didn't talk about from the larger study that Chronicle of Higher Education did, Gen Z is very attuned to their foibles, to their weaknesses. They can name their maladies, they can name their neurological, emotional, whatever kind of weakness they feel they have in their organism, they can tell you what it is. And indeed, they're very aware of triggers and things in the classroom that get them off track from learning. And so all of this that we try to do in classes specifically, or maybe not even consciously lowering these affective factors and putting down the affective filters there. To tweak our programs, so I'm here in a sense preaching to the choir here, what kinds of things have we done, or should we be doing? And in this case, we've already done these. In many cases, we've increased that contact with the student by flipping our classrooms. Put all the explication of grammar, phonetics, readings, films that they should watch before coming to class, out of class. Do all that at home. That's the great use of the technology. They're perfectly happy to watch YouTube videos. But then come into class and face-to-face, interact. Blended instruction while we're in class. Use of technology, use of video, use of audio, use of reality things, objects from our countries and cultures. Integrated web-based interaction. Using the internet thoughtfully, both in class and out of class. Again, more chances for them to be exposed to other types of interaction. Using portfolios as a sizable means of assessment rather than, basically, let me even rephrase that a bit, changing up from a midterm and a final is going to be 60% of your grade, to lots of different ways to assess different kinds of progress in our courses. That some of our students will simply be better performers, being able to put on a good skit, and there may be something that you have that would be performance-based. Others are very good at compiling material based around their own interests, and that's where portfolios will come in. Other students do terrific on these pen and paper or online type tests. Using blog sites or chat sites for autonomous interaction, giving our students, we're not talking fortunately about K through 12 where we have all kinds of restrictions on what students can do online, or students, as long as they've got even a cell phone, can now live chat with almost any of our populations around the world and use that to get them, again, to find interested parties in things that they're interested in doing. And now more and more, study abroad being reimagined, reshaped, recrafted to be, again, relevant. I'm not going abroad just because I want to get a sticker that says, I love Moscow on it. I want to go to Moscow or to Russia because I want to learn, I want to do something there that's relevant to what I'm going to do when I get back to the States. So are there internship programs there with hospitals, with schools, with, as I just literally sent a student off last week, the first AIDS clinic in Moscow. She is there working on the ground as an intern, right? They want to go study abroad, but they want it, again, to be, the word, wait for it, relevant, right? They want to be relevant, so all of these things shifting. So flipping the classroom, not were the goals that we have in the classroom. Again, I'm going to go quickly through these because I'm looking around, I recognize almost everyone here and know, most of you know, probably already have experienced the flipped classroom. But just a quick reminder, it might be good also, well, since we're here in February, of giving ourselves a kind of midterm assessment of how are we doing. So things that my classroom used to be, when I was learning Russian, filled with, we relegate out of class. The students don't want to hear, Gen Zers don't want to hear me simply use that class time, 50 minutes or 75 minutes, to explain verbal aspect. They're perfectly happy at home to hear that lecture on a YouTube video, but not while we're in class. That class is supposed to be interactive, so they don't want grammar presented. They don't want me to be introducing new vocabulary. Send that out of class. At home, homework, let them hear things that will be used in class the next day, or watch videos, or write an assignment, writing homework. Preparing their portfolio activities out of class. Reading texts, preparing anything that you want to discuss in class the next day. All of that, as much as we can, in frames that explain what it is, online, out of class, so that class will be this kind of interaction. Active practice of the new material and recycling of early material, but active. Using lots of authentic reality and media to introduce cultural material and to focus on production. And by that, I don't simply mean oral production, obviously writing about these things that we do in class, so written production, but also active listening. Literally, if you can call it listening production as an active skill, right? So that we groom, if you will, active listeners as much as we do good speakers of our languages. In order to do that, lots of pair work, lots of group work. Again, Gen Z says this is how we want to do it, by the way, and group recitation. That's a little old school, right? Where you actually get the whole class. Say this together, say it with me, right? Say it with me. Everyone keeps making mistakes saying, in this year, v этом году, which in Russian is irregular, that ending is irregular, so I just, everybody together, в этом году, one more time, в этом году, everybody, в этом году, and yeah, that kind of thing is exactly what they want in class as well. Project-based learning. I'm focusing just a couple of slides on this because for some of us, this particular part of the flipped classroom may be newer if you haven't thought about this. It's a modification of what in the 90s we call task-based instruction. The modification here is in more groups working together. So it is like task-based instruction. It engages the student, the learner, experientially, hands-on with the language and culture. It's got a goal involved. There's a product at the end of it. A question should be answered, a thing should be made, a problem should be solved. There should be a product at the end of these projects, right? At the end of project-based learning. And it allows students to do this either individually or in groups. And indeed, more and more with this new generation, it's a group project. The students initiate it, so it's heavily, heavily student-centered. Instructor-mediated. We're not off the hook. We still don't want the students simply going out and, I don't know if you've tried this in class the first time you do it, we always get a little surprised with some of the directions that students will take off on. And so if you're not careful mediating, you wind up with, as I did my first year of doing this 2 years ago, project-based, was a group of male students, of course, male students coming in with a project on how to purchase a wife on a Russian website. And it's not that it wasn't a successful project, apparently, but it was that they found themselves on some, shall we say, questionable website. So you do want to be there as mediator, right, coach, through this process. Standards-based. It's all about, well, what can you do with the language? Well, try. So can you find this material? Well, what's missing? I can help mediate, get you to that next step. But it's all very standards-driven, interest-driven. It's what they want to be looking at. I love this point. With all of the projects, their proficiency self-leveling. At the point that the student cannot do the task, the students find that, okay, here's where we either need to break it off or change the direction because my Greek, my German, my Italian isn't yet at that level. So they will seek out, as it were, their level of proficiency as they work on these projects. This is terrific, by the way, when we get out of, especially our first year introductory novice level courses, and students at the intermediate level are all over the place in terms of proficiency in one group. So you have a group of 15 to 20 students and maybe 4, 5 levels of proficiency in that one group. So that's really, really helpful to let the students work in groups that proficiency levels are relevant, relevant, relevant. They've chosen the project, they're initiating it, they're doing the research, they'll do the presentation in class. It is all about them. Assessing, using portfolios to assess. What's so great about them, kind of a recap. Autonomous interaction, we're teaching our learners how to use the language on their own. Go out there, find stuff, use it, ask questions, get turned down to accept rejection or denial in the language and so forth. Very student-centered, very interest-based and self-leveling, all those things. Again, used to be that we would get these, those of you who've done portfolios might have gotten the old paper-style portfolios where everyone puts in this project, this writing sample, and so forth. Now students will submit either in fact, the old, sort of new old school is giving you a thumb drive with all their portfolio materials on it. More students, almost all of my last class that I did, everybody did it as a dedicated website. Usually they'll do, I've had some do YouTube channels, I've had most of them do Google Drive channels, but all their materials are online. And that includes printouts that are on as docs, audio files, video files, you name it, they put it online now for their portfolios. The takeaway, so we get to questions here. Gen D students want to understand that the time, the effort, And yes, the cost, the money that they're putting into learning a world language and culture is relevant to their future goals and plans in some way, shape, or form. That sounds like a truism. Sounds like, well, of course, and if you're choosing to take, or I've got to fulfill my language requirements, so I want this at least to have something to do with who I am, what I do, and so forth. Yeah, that's fine. Gen Z is a little different here. It really is a much more focused kind of relevance they're looking for. How is it that this language is going to help me, even if I'm an engineer, help me do that for the next however many years I'm going to focus on that. And remembering this image, actually, Gen Z was born with, if you have children born in this period, and you've seen infants, literally, who know how to swipe before they know how to wipe. It just amazes me, actually. I watched the movements and this, right? First time going to a print page and doing this on a page to make the font bigger, it's not going to happen. Good luck with that. But yeah, all the motions that go along with it are now inherent in this generation. So, with that in mind, I would love, and I do hope, as I said, send me an email, or Betsy can just simply maybe collect everyone's email from here, and I'm happy to provide you with the report itself if you want to see the longer study. This talk focused specifically on the two sections that I think have the most relevance to language and culture courses. But questions, please. Anything you've got, you want to make sure. Yes, we don't want to keep people too much over time. Yes, please.
Question. I'm not used to going first, but I'm going to ask my question.
Go first.
I do have two children who are Gen Z, and for me, what is emblematic, a lot of what you said, is the stickers on a laptop.
Yeah.
Because everything is personalized, and we wouldn't dream, like, I don't think most of us would dream of putting something on the laptop. You know, we just take what we receive, and every single one, I'll look for the stickers they've got because they're personalizing.
It's mine.
But my question is, and my concern is, with so much focus on the personalization, does that then affect their curiosity about other cultures, their sensitivity, or their ability to become fluent not only in a language but in another culture?
So there are two, terrific. That's a terrific question. That actually is one that came up in, I think it was, I did this at Stanford over break, and a couple of the instructors were saying the same thing. Are we not isolating, in a sense, kind of making little islands?
Or have to make apologies in a sense for trying to promote cultural sensitivity. I fear it, and I'm wondering what you see or what.
So my best response, I tried there, and the other instructors seemed to, I think, catch on with where I think my thinking is on this. That is, Gen Z isn't simply a U.S. phenomenon. Right? So right away, what seems to be catching on are students seeing and interacting with their peers in the target culture, language, countries.
So maybe they connect on a very level of what's personal to me and also to someone.
What is personal to them may not be what's personal to, in the case of the languages I do, Ivan or Masha. And so they find that, and I've already seen this in the last couple of years, they find that as their point, this wonderful Russian expression, the sort of pivotal point, that